Lou, do you see Georgia going undefeated in the regular season when potential loss is Tennessee? I think it's more like I think there's an over a 50% chance that Georgia goes 12-0 in the regular season. Maybe it's a 51% chance because anything can happen in any week. You can have an off week and get beat by Mizzou like we almost did this year, and like you mentioned, the game at Tennessee.
Yeah.
I'm also here. Look, I'm concerned too. When you look at the schedule, I don't know if we'll ever know why Georgia kind of sleptwalk through a 4 or 5 week period. I mean, there's some obvious, this just look at the teams we were playing type of argument. But if that's the case, then look at Georgia's first 6 games. So they could lose one. I mean, look, we could lose to South Carolina. If the South Carolina game for some reason ends up being at noon, we could lose that if we just show up with the whole all we got to do is roll the ball out on the field and we're going to win attitude, which is what we did in a lot of games last year. I don't think, we're way better than South Carolina. Of course we are. Just like we're way better than Mizzou. We're more than 10 points better than Kentucky. But if we, so if you think it was hard for Georgia to get up for every game this year, don't you think it will be maybe even harder next year? And everywhere you look already, what are people talking about when they talk about Georgia next year? Oh, look at his schedule. Worst schedule I've ever seen. That's what happened last year. People said, oh, my God, Georgia plays Oregon. Then they don't even have to show up again until Halloween. And what happened? They almost got beat in that stretch because they bought into that idea. The team bought into the narrative that, oh, Georgia's going to win these next 6 games by 50 points, and they didn't play great. Stetson Bennett didn't have a touchdown pass for 3 games in a row. Brock Bowers disappeared. We were trailing Missouri until 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Kent State looked like they actually belonged on the field with us, which they don't. So, Georgia will be huge favorites in every game they play. Georgia will be a favorite even at Tennessee. I don't know about a huge favorite, but they'll be a favorite there. But if they come, so it's always it's always possible that Georgia can lose a game or two. But when you just look at who they're playing, the rosters, who's coming back, all that kind of stuff, Georgia's going to be a significant favorite again in every game they play. And it's a sleepwalk schedule, especially the first month of the season. We play 3 group of 5 teams and South Carolina. That's our first 4 games. It's a joke. It's a joke. But after winning their first national title, it was, I think we'll all admit, what games did Georgia look really good in?
Oregon,
Yep.
South Carolina.
Yep.
See,
Tennessee.
the national champ. Yeah, Tennessee, LSU, TCU. Yeah.
Yeah. Every game that people said Georgia had a chance of losing, Georgia looked their best.
Right, Vandy, yeah.
But Mizzou, Kentucky, Kent State, I mean, and that was after winning 1 national title. Now they've won 2 in a row. It's possible they show up like that and get beat by a South Carolina or a whatever, fill-in-the-blank team. I mean, I don't think they will, but it's possible. So I hear a lot of people saying, oh, Georgia going 12-0. They probably will. They're better than all 12 teams they play, but it's hard to win 1 national title. It's even harder to win 2. It's almost impossible to win 3, as proven by the fact that it hasn't happened in 90 years. No one's won 3 natties in a row in 90 years.
When was the last time it happened?
The 30s.
Okay. And do you know who it was?
Minnesota.
Okay.
And back then, that was pre-AP poll. There wasn't even an AP poll back then. So you've got multiple teams that claimed national titles for all 3 of those years. But Minnesota claims national titles for 3 years in a row. So I haven't gone back and I can't tell you what Minnesota's record was all 3 of those years. I don't know if they were undefeated and so they have a legitimate claim, or if it's an Alabama deal where they're claiming titles when they lost their bowl game. I have no idea, but
right.
But they're recognized. Minnesota is recognized as the only team to win 3 natties in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, Minnesota has like a bunch of natties, but I think like their last one was like in the 50s.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Our schedule is really bad just
so
because the East is really bad also.
So I guess that makes them a blue blood, right?
Yeah. Now, look, people, there's nothing Georgia can do about how good or bad the teams are that they have to play. There's nothing Georgia can do about that, right? There's nothing Georgia can do about the fact that Georgia Tech is in the toilet. I mean, the reality is Georgia Tech is an in-state Power 5 team. Whether they're the worst Power 5 team or the best Power 5 team, we got to play them. Georgia Tech didn't cry about playing Georgia in the 90s.
Oh.
Because Georgia Tech was the better program, especially the first half of the 90s, than Georgia was. So these things go back and forth. You know, Tennessee fans that spend half their waking hours crying that they've got to play Alabama and Georgia doesn't. You weren't crying in the late 90s and early 2000s that you had to play Alabama because Alabama was terrible. You know, you don't get to change your schedule around and cry about it just because one team or another happens to be good or bad during some particular stretch. Alabama and Tennessee is a rivalry game. It needs to be played every year, and it's going to be played every year. Whether both teams are top 10 programs, neither teams are top 10 programs, or one or the other is. Crying about it's not going to do any good. I mean, Georgia's got to play Auburn every year. If Auburn suddenly becomes a top 10 program year in and year out, are we supposed to then sit around and cry that Tennessee doesn't have to play Auburn? You'll never catch me doing that. You have to play the teams your conference tells you have to play. There's nothing you can do about it. What you can do about it is not cancel the Oklahoma game. That's what you can do. And the whole the SEC made them do it thing is bullshit. The SEC can't make you do anything in the non-con. Nothing. They can't make you schedule a Power 5 team or not. They can't do anything. They have no control. There is no SEC rule about what you have to do in the non-con. There's not a real rule. There's not a written rule. There's not a pretend rule. The Big Ten has a pretend rule. The Big Ten has a completely made-up, fake non-con scheduling rule. The SEC doesn't have that. The Big Ten has this rule that you don't have to follow. Well, then that's not a fucking rule, dummy. The Big Ten has a rule that you have to play at least one non-con Power 5 team. It's a rule. It's written down. Find me Michigan's Power 5 non-con game last year. Find it this year. You can't.
Nope.
Same thing. So the SEC has no authority to tell Georgia who to schedule or not in the non-con. So this idea that the SEC made Georgia cancel the Oklahoma game is just not true. If Georgia wanted to go play on the road at Oklahoma in week 2, they could have still done it. Now, I've been dogging teams like Tennessee and Ohio State for canceling big games. Now it's Georgia's turn. Georgia did the same thing. I understand why Ohio State canceled the Georgia series, but the fact is they canceled it. It's their fault. I understand why Georgia canceled the Oklahoma series, but Georgia canceled it. It's their fault. And there ain't a soul in here that can look me in the face and tell me Oklahoma would beat Georgia in 2023. I don't care that it's in Norman. It could be on the moon. So that makes it even worse that we canceled that game. Now, here's the thing. People are saying, oh, Georgia canceled the Oklahoma game. Their schedule's terrible. Even if we didn't cancel the Oklahoma game, and what, we show up in Norman and beat them 35-10, are people going to give Georgia credit for that, Vic? No.
No.
What would they say? Look at Lou bragging about beating a terrible Oklahoma team. So I don't understand why y'all are dogging on Georgia for canceling the Oklahoma game when Georgia could show up in Norman and win by 50, and you'd be saying the same things in the comments section as if we played Ball State. Look at Lou. Look at him. Look. Bragging about beating a terrible Oklahoma team. SEC canceled the game. No, it's bullshit. The SEC can't cancel a non-con game. That's a talking point. That's a talking point the SEC put out to make Georgia feel better. about canceling that game.
Yeah.
The SEC can't make Georgia schedule or unschedule a non-con game. They have no authority. They have no say-so at all. None.
No.
Zero.
No.
What should have happened, you know what the SEC does have control over? Conference scheduling. You know what the SEC should have done? The SEC should have said, okay, Georgia's got a non-con game scheduled at Oklahoma in 2023, 2 years before Oklahoma joins the SEC. Oklahoma's return trip to Athens isn't scheduled until 2029. Well, by that time, Oklahoma's in the SEC. So Georgia should have canceled that home game in 2029, played the non-con road game this year, and then the SEC should have immediately came out and said the first year Oklahoma's in the SEC, they're playing on the road in Athens. That's what should have happened. It's an easy fix. Georgia could have chose to keep its non-con game on the road in Norman for this year with an assurance from the SEC that Oklahoma's first year in the SEC would include a road trip to Athens, and then Georgia could have canceled the back end of the Oklahoma home and home in Athens in 2028 or 2029, whatever year it's scheduled. Problem solved. Georgia could have had a non-con game this year, and Oklahoma could have been forced to play on the road because the SEC can force Oklahoma to play on the road once Oklahoma's in the SEC. They can force them. You're going to play in Athens in 2025, the first year you're in the SEC, period. Thank you. Have a great day. But they didn't do that. They canceled both games, and then and now Georgia's playing Ball State or whatever the hell else they're playing. A bunch of nobodies. And I don't like say, look, these season ticket holders should be madder than me. Yet another reason why we need to get that fucking game out of Jacksonville, too. What game are you excited about as a season ticket holder? I'm seriously asking. South Carolina? Really? You're propping you donated thousands of dollars to the university and then sent in your ticket money for a week 3 home game against South Carolina? Bullshit. Bullshit. What a waste.
Yep. Sometimes it be that way.
I can tell you right now, there's a 0% chance I'm going to a Georgia home game in this year. 0. There ain't one worth going to.
No.
0% chance.
Yeah, my headphones died, so.
That's good, isn't it, or no?
No.
Oh, okay. How are you hearing me without headphones?
Oh, I'm just hearing you through the computer.
Bluetooth?
What?
Nothing. I don't know what I'm saying.
Just through the computer speakers. Yeah.
I should cut that part out of the show where I just rant and rave like that about Jordan and upload it as a video on the regular channel.